Hi there, Sandra here from Create in Spain. Today I wanted to talk about UV resin. Now, if you're familiar with my channel, you might well realise that I use a UV resin for stamp making, but this is a different kind of UV resin. This is craft resin. Now, as it happens, my son visited last year. He was doing some craft stuff with me and he wanted some UV resin. Bought this one. I think it cost something like about €8 for 100 grams, and that was on Amazon, I believe. And because we got Prime, he wouldn't have paid for postage, I don't expect. But it's a relatively small bottle. But it was a fairly good resin. This time, though, when I went to use it, it was developing lumps. I think it was probably past its best buy date. And so I pour a bit out and then I find a lump in it. So that wasn't absolutely wonderful. Now this one says UV light 2 to 4 minutes. So there we go. Now, there is another type of resin which I have just got. I requested it for Christmas. This one is by Frenchion and it's a clear hard UV resin, just the same, high transparency. It says it has a new upgrade. And it is a faster curing, a lower viscosity, which means it's more fluid, lower UV wattage required, new formula, lower odour, no shrinking. Now, this one has almost no smell to it at all. This one has definitely got a stronger smell. I won't say it's horrible. It reminds me of eucalyptus, that sort of smell. Wintergreen chest rub or something. I don't know what it is, but it's got that kind of scent to it as far as I'm concerned. Not horrendous, but it does smell enough for me to want a window open when I'm using it. All right. But regarding the other properties, it's pretty good. This is a little pendant that I made with the old resin. I put some glitter, a few gems in there, some gold flake, some silver flake perhaps, no, just gold flake, and it's okay. However, it did obviously curve in the mould. Now, for someone who's experienced with UV gels, you might know of a way of avoiding that. I did do it in layers, but it still ended up curving. It's not drastic, it's a piece to either go on a keyring or on a chain as a necklace. Do I care that it's curved? Not really, not really a problem. This one is one that I did with the new resin, and again it has a bit of a curve on it, but I think it's a little clearer. It doesn't seem to have the very, very slight yellowy tinge that this one does. This one I put in a few little beads and added some holographic glitter behind that as well. And I think that's come out quite nicely. You may have seen these, which I did again with the old gel. And this shows up quite well the difference, the real difference between the two gels, and that is the viscosity. This is more of a doming gel. This has got quite a nice dome to it. It didn't seep out over the frame. This gel, being thinner, is much better for flooding, but it doesn't dome in the same way, and it is inclined to breach a dome. If you try and dome it, it will breach the edges a little. But every gel has its pros and cons. Now that I know that one is a thinner one, I know how I can use it. So this is a little one that I did with just a wooden base again. I cut these on the CNC. They only take a few minutes to cut. And I've added some chunky glitter into this one. It's quite fun. A very tiny one on the same vein. And I also tried adding some colouring. This was coloured with food colouring, a spray food colouring that I can use in the airbrush. It does have some particles in it though, so the particles tend to go to the outside. you can see it better from the back than you can from the front. This one here, I set a gem within the heart shape, and the heart was simply a little mould. If you're using moulds, you want to make sure they're transparent because otherwise the UV gel won't cure properly. And I tend to cure from the top and from the bottom as well. Can't remember what I used to actually colour that one. It came out quite well colour-wise, but it kind of loses its shine, its beauty, I think, when it's heavily coloured. This one I used some yellow gold airbrush acrylic, and yes, it doesn't look wonderful. It's coloured it, but I've lost the shine, I've lost the glitz out of it, and it made it shrink on the back. This one I added a little bit of Reeves Iridescent Medium, and if you wanted a snow type effect, that's actually come out quite nicely. Just a tiny bit of the medium mixed into the gel, and I topped it off with some clear gel on the back. Now you may be thinking, well, I don't have a CNC, I can't make little wooden backs. You can if you want to make open backed bezels with wire, copper wire, gold wire, silver wire, whatever you like. And the way that you cope with that is you put it onto sticky tape. You allow it to stick to the sticky tape and then you fill it with the gel. And these two, this one not quite as successful, I don't think. These two are done just with card. In this particular case, I have a few layers of watercolour paper cut out. And what I did was I set it onto masking tape, sticky side up, and then I used some gold powder, some gold pigment powder to colour the back of it, and then I've added beads and some little bits of gold and other sparkly bits. So that's quite nice. I think this one is my preferred one. I've left the back of it black, and I've added some stars, some heavy glitter, and some little pieces of fake gold flake. And I have 3 containers, 3 large 10-gram containers of this flake stuff, and it's lovely. Terrible to contain if you happen to want any air conditioning or heating on or something like that, blown air. You definitely don't want to do it with pets around, but it is beautiful stuff. So that can be done with straightforward card. Now the other thing I decided to try out, because I didn't know if it would work, and it works really, really well, is 3D printing a bezel. I'm going to make some keychains, and for these I've got some 3D printed black plastic bezels. Now on these, what I've done when I designed them is I've just put a loop on them already on the back. It doesn't go all the way through to the front here, it's just on the back. So I'm actually going to paint the inside of these before I put some resin on. Now to do that, I've got this group of paints here which are Vallejo shifters. The shifters by Vallejo are paints that change colour from one colour to another. They are best used on a black surface, so this is ideal. I've got quite a few different colours here, and I'll just look at them and decide, yeah, this one, that one, whatever. Now, you can use these in an airbrush. For this, I'm not going to bother airbrushing, it's too small to want to bother. You do need to shake them up really well before use, but you only need a drop or two of these, and you will be doing some really wonderful colour effects. It's not the only brand of paints that you can get to do this, but these are probably the best airbrush paints. Because they're airbrush paints, they're thin, they're like milk, and that makes it really nice and easy for spreading the colour around. And I'm just going to put dots of the various colours. While I've done this and stirred it around, I will leave it to dry. It'll take a while, but I'm not in a hurry, so it's no problem. And just allow it to float over the surface. Now, one thing I would make sure of if you're doing this, apart from to check whether you've got any bubbles, which sometimes can appear, is to try and make sure that your surface is level, because if your surface isn't level, then your fill is not going to be level either. I think this one's possibly going to be my favourite. I like the colours in this. This is a jar of imitation silver leaf flake, and this stuff is really, really pretty. However, I haven't taken the lid off because I tend to peel a little bit of the lid back and get a flake out that way. So that can go under the lamp as well. And I can take this one out. That's pretty solid. Here are the 4 charms that I have completed. Now, I will say that with that particular resin, it's quite difficult to do the domed effect and not have it bleed over. I managed to do it on this one, and then a couple of the other ones it did bleed over. Now, this one I've partly rectified, not completely. I need to give it a little bit more care and attention. But the way to actually sort this out is to use an e-file with different bits in order to file away the resin that overflowed. Now, this basic sanding bit wouldn't really do the job, but I happen to have quite a few other bits, and some of them are particularly well suited to it. Things like this ball bit, which can get into quite tight spaces. And I've got a selection of different bits and shapes. I've got ceramic ones, I've got polishers, I've got all sorts of things in here. Now, I use a nail drill because, or an e-file as they're properly called, because I find it very handy to have in the craft room. So if you don't happen to have an e-file and you're into making jewellery of different sorts and acrylic things, i.e. resin, all that sort of stuff, as well as a few other things like 3D printing, it can come in quite handy. And I suggest you have a look. They're not overly expensive, they're not as hard to use as something like a Dremel, because this is very light and it's easily manoeuvred. It doesn't make your hand ache when you're using it, and it's perfectly adequate for doing this kind of thing. I even use it on the woodwork things that I do. If I've got some rough edges, I'll sand things down with it. Very handy, very, very multi-use really. The more I use it, the more uses I tend to find for it. But anyhow, the patterns on these have come out quite nicely. I do have to take some of the acrylic off around here because it's over the hole and it doesn't quite look right. But you can see the different things that I've put in there and the different colours, and they are nice. They are nice and shiny, and the colours do change. That goes from a purple to a yellow and a blue, for example. This one I did put a little bit too much glitter in when I mixed it up, but it still looks pretty. It's just that it's obscured the paint behind it, but it's come out nicely. And I think this one is, as I thought it would probably be, my favourite. It's in my particular colour scheme. I love it. So you could use them as pendants, or you could use them on keychains and things like that. They're ideal little gifts if you want to give something personal to someone, and they're just fun to make. What I would suggest, if you have the bottle of resin that I have, which is more of a thin resin, is that you also get one which is known for its doming qualities, because you can fill this with the thin one relatively easily and then just top it with a doming resin which won't go over the edges quite as easily as this one does. But I think they've turned out pretty well, so I'm happy with the result. That's it for the moment. I will see you again soon. Take care now. Bye bye.